The doorbell rang. Karen stood there, drunk and belligerent, screaming obscenities. Before I could react, she lunged forward and grabbed my wife's hair, yanking her to the ground. My daughter watched in horror, camera phone in hand, recording the entire violent confrontation. The commotion startled my wife and I as we sat in our living room, enjoying a quiet Friday night. We weren't expecting any visitors, so when the doorbell suddenly echoed through the house, we exchanged puzzled glances. "Who on earth could that be?" my wife muttered, rising from the couch. I followed close behind as she approached the front door. Peering through the peephole, her eyes went wide. "It's Karen," she whispered, her voice laced with concern. "What does she want?" Before I could respond, the door flew open, and there stood our unhinged neighbor, her face twisted in a drunken rage. "You backstabbing bitches," she screamed, stumbling forward. "I know what you did." My wife tried to close the door, but Karen was too quick. She lunged forward, her bony fingers latching onto my wife's hair. With a viscous yank, she pulled my wife to the ground, eliciting a pained scream. I stood there, stunned, as the scene unfolded before me. My daughter, who had been in her room, came rushing down the stairs, cell phone in hand. She froze, mouth agape, capturing the entire violent encounter on video. "Karen, stop," I yelled, finally finding my voice. "What the hell is wrong with you?" But Karen ignored me, her grip on my wife's hair unwavering. She yanked harder, causing my wife to cry out in agony. "You think you can just betray me and get away with it?" Karen spat, her eyes wild with fury. "I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget." My wife struggled to break free, her hands clawing at Karen's arm, but the crazed woman refused to let go. I rushed forward, intent on prying her off, but Karen lashed out, her free hand connecting with the side of my face in a stinging slap. The blow caught me off guard, and I stumbled backward, dazed. I could hear my daughter's frantic sobs in the background, her camera still recording the unfolding nightmare. The shock of Karen's violent outburst subsided, and a primal surge of protective rage coursed through me. I lunged forward, grabbing the crazed woman's arm with both hands. "Let her go, Karen," I yelled, my voice quaking with fury. "This has gone too far." Karen's grip on my wife's hair momentarily loosened, and my wife took the opportunity to scramble away, her sobs filling the air. But Karen whirled around, her free hand swinging wildly, connecting with the side of my face once more. The blow stung, but I refused to let go. We grappled, our bodies twisting and colliding as we struggled for control. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of my daughter, her face streaked with tears, her phone still recording the unfolding drama. "Call the police," I shouted, my words punctuated by the sound of our frantic movements. My daughter hesitated, her eyes filled with fear, but eventually she nodded and fled back upstairs, her footsteps thundering against the hardwood. Karen and I continued our desperate dance, her nails raking against my skin, her foul-smelling breath assaulting my senses. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my heart pounding in my ears as I fought to subdue the crazed woman. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my wife reach for the baseball bat we kept by the front door. With a determined expression, she gripped the smooth wood and, with a swift motion, brought it crashing down against Karen's shoulder. The impact caused Karen to scream in pain and release her grip on my hair. Seizing the opportunity, I shoved her backward, sending her tumbling to the floor. She landed with a thud, her eyes wide with shock and fury. For a moment, the house fell silent, save for the sound of our heavy breathing and my daughter's quiet sobs from the top of the stairs. Karen remained on the floor, her chest heaving, her eyes darting between my wife and me with a mixture of fear and rage. "You're going to pay for this," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "Both of you are going to regret the day you crossed me." My wife gripped the baseball bat tighter, her knuckles turning white. "Get out of our house, Karen," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "And don't you ever come near us again." Karen pushed herself up, wincing in pain as she cradled her injured shoulder. "This isn't over," she growled, her gaze burning with resentment. "You'll both pay for this, I swear it." With those parting words, she turned and stumbled out the door, disappearing into the night. My wife and I stood there, frozen, the adrenaline slowly fading from our systems. I could feel the weight of my daughter's stare as she slowly made her way down the stairs, her phone still clutched in her hand. "Dad, Mom, are you okay?" she asked, her voice quivering. I pulled her into a tight hug, my own hands shaking. "We're fine, sweetheart," I murmured, my lips pressed against the top of her head. "Everything's going to be okay." But as I held my daughter close, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this was far from over. Karen's parting words had a chilling finality to them, and I knew that she would not let this incident go so easily. The threat of her revenge loomed, casting a dark shadow over our family. The following days were tense and unsettling. Karen had disappeared, leaving us on edge and constantly looking over our shoulders. My wife, still shaken by the encounter, refused to leave the house alone, and I found myself cutting work early to ensure she wasn't left vulnerable. Our daughter, meanwhile, had become withdrawn and jumpy. The traumatic event had clearly left a lasting impact, and I could see the fear and uncertainty in her eyes whenever she glanced out the window or heard an unexpected noise. "What if she comes back?" she would whisper, her voice trembling. "What if she tries to hurt us again?" I wished I had a reassuring answer, but the truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was plotting her revenge. Her parting threat had been laced with a chilling determination, and I knew that she would not rest until she had exacted some form of retribution. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, the doorbell suddenly rang, causing us all to jump. My wife and I exchanged a worried glance, and I could see the color drain from our daughter's face. "I'll get it," I said, trying to sound calm and collected. Slowly, I made my way to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. Peering through the peephole, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't Karen, but rather our next-door neighbor, Mr. Johnson, a kind and reliable man we had known for years. I opened the door, and Mr. Johnson's jovial expression quickly shifted to one of concern. "John, are you all right?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I heard about the incident with Karen. Is everything okay?" I nodded, forcing a weary smile. "We're managing, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for checking on us." He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Listen, if there's anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to let me know. I know Karen has always been a bit unstable, and I'm worried about your family's safety." I felt a surge of gratitude toward our kind neighbor. "We appreciate that, Mr. Johnson. And if you don't mind, could you keep an eye out for any suspicious activity? Karen threatened to come back, and we're all a little on edge." Of course," he replied without hesitation. "I'll be sure to keep a close watch. You just focus on keeping yourselves safe, all right?" As I closed the door, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Having Mr. Johnson on our side, keeping a watchful eye, gave me a small glimmer of hope that we might be able to weather this storm. The days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of Karen. The initial tension and fear slowly gave way to a cautious sense of normalcy, as we tried to resume our daily routines and regain a sense of security in our own home. However, the video footage our daughter had captured continued to weigh heavily on our minds. We knew that it could be a crucial piece of evidence if Karen decided to retaliate or take legal action against us. The thought of having to defend ourselves against her unhinged accusations made my stomach twist with anxiety. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, our daughter spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, Dad, I think we should go to the police," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I have the video of what happened with Karen. We need to report her before she tries to do something else." My wife and I exchanged a worried glance. We had considered this option, but the prospect of involving the authorities and potentially escalating the situation only added to our sense of unease. "Honey, I know you're worried, but we don't want to make this any worse than it already is," I said, reaching out to give her hand a reassuring squeeze. The police might not be able to do much, and it could just provoke Karen even further. Our daughter's brow furrowed, and I could see the frustration building behind her eyes. "But Dad, she can't just get away with this. She needs to be held accountable. We can't just live in fear forever." My wife spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "We understand your concerns, sweetheart. But right now, the most important thing is keeping our family safe. We'll figure this out, but we need to be cautious and not make any rash decisions." Tears welled up in our daughter's eyes, and she nodded reluctantly. I could see the conflict within her, the desire to seek justice warring with the instinct to protect our loved ones. As I held her close, I couldn't help but wonder if we were making the right call. The threat of Karen's retaliation still loomed, and the uncertainty of the situation weighed heavily on all of us. The uneasy calm that had settled over our household was shattered one afternoon when a loud crash echoed from the backyard. My wife and I exchanged a terrified glance, and our daughter let out a panicked gasp. Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed a baseball bat and cautiously made my way toward the sliding glass door. Peering outside, I felt my blood run cold. There, amidst the shattered remains of a flower pot, stood Karen, her eyes wild and her face contorted with rage. "You thought you could hide from me, didn't you?" she screamed, advancing toward the house. "Well, I'm not going anywhere until you pay for what you've done." I flung open the door, baseball bat in hand, ready to defend my family. But before I could react, Karen had picked up a large rock and hurled it straight through the glass, shattering the panel and sending shards flying in all directions. My wife and daughter screamed, ducking for cover as the sound of breaking glass filled the air. I rushed forward, brandishing the bat, but Karen was already climbing through the opening, her movements fueled by a manic energy. "Get out of my house, Karen," I shouted, swinging the bat with all my might. The wooden weapon connected with her shoulder, and she let out a pained cry, but she refused to back down. Suddenly, a blur of motion caught my eye, and I watched in horror as our daughter emerged from her hiding place, cell phone in hand. She was live streaming the entire confrontation, her face a mask of fear and determination. "Someone, please help," she cried into the camera, her voice quivering. "Karen's in our house, and she's trying to hurt us." The realization that my child was putting herself in harm's way to document this ordeal sent a wave of panic through me. I had to find a way to end this confrontation before it spiraled even further out of control. As Karen continued her frenzied advance, I swung the bat again, this time connecting with her hip. She let out a pained yelp and stumbled backward, momentarily losing her balance. "Call the police," I shouted to my daughter, my eyes never leaving the crazed woman before me. My daughter hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen of her phone. "But Dad, I'd—" "Do it, now," I commanded, leaving no room for argument. With a trembling nod, my daughter scurried away, her frantic footsteps echoing through the house as she searched for a better signal. Karen, sensing her opportunity slipping away, charged forward once more, her hands outstretched and her eyes wild with desperation. I braced myself, gripping the bat tightly as I prepared to meet her attack. But before she could reach me, a sudden blur of motion caught my attention. My wife, armed with a heavy glass vase, swung it with all her might, the object colliding with the side of Karen's head with a sickening thud. Karen immediately crumpled to the floor, her body motionless. I stood there, stunned, as my wife dropped the now shattered vase and rushed to my side, her hands trembling. "Is she?" my wife asked, her voice barely a whisper. I knelt down, my fingers pressed against Karen's neck, searching for a pulse. After a moment, I let out a shaky breath. "She's alive," I said, "but unconscious." The sound of sirens in the distance filled the air, a reminder that our daughter had succeeded in calling for help. As I rose to my feet, I felt a surge of both relief and dread. The confrontation with Karen had finally come to an end, but I knew that the aftermath would be far from over. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens blaring and lights flashing. My wife and I stood by, our hearts pounding, as the officers quickly assessed the situation and apprehended the still unconscious Karen. Our daughter emerged from her hiding place, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She clutched her phone tightly, the live stream still broadcasting the aftermath of the confrontation. The officers asked us a series of questions, taking detailed statements and examining the evidence, including the video footage our daughter had captured. They seemed convinced that Karen had acted with malicious intent, and we were assured that she would face serious consequences for her actions. As the police waited for an ambulance to arrive and transport Karen to the hospital, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of relief and unease. While we had finally put an end to her relentless harassment, the emotional toll of the ordeal was still palpable. Our daughter, once so vibrant and carefree, now appeared withdrawn and anxious. The trauma of witnessing the violent confrontation had left a deep mark, and I knew it would take time and support for her to heal. My wife, too, was visibly shaken, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any sign of further danger. The sense of security we had once taken for granted had been shattered, and it would be a long road to reclaiming that feeling of safety in our own home. Yet, as I looked at my family, battered but still standing strong, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had faced the storm, and though the journey ahead might be arduous, we would weather it together, united in our resolve to move forward and reclaim our lives. The flashing lights of the police cars and the distant wail of the ambulance faded into the background as we embraced, a silent promise to never let the threat of Karen's vengeance tear us apart.